No one screamed when the gates were closed. There was no dramatic announcement, no final warning, no mercy built into the decision. One moment, the city still breathed. The next, it was sealed. People who had stepped outside hours earlier returned to find wooden barriers nailed shut, guards standing above them, and silence where their lives used to be. Some begged, some shouted names, some simply sat down, realizing they would never cross those walls again. This was not war. This was not punishment by an enemy. This was a choice made by people who believed isolation was the only way to survive. For most of human history, disease arrived without explanation. There were no tests, no images of bacteria, no certainty of cause. Illness appeared suddenly, spread invisibly, and killed indiscriminately. People watched family members fall ill in the morning and die before nightfall. They noticed patterns, but didn't understand mechanisms. And so, when fear reached its peak, societies across centuries arrived at the same conclusion. Separation was safety. Distance was survival. Isolation felt like control in a world that had none. During the Great Plague outbreaks in Europe, especially from the 14th to the 17th centuries, isolation became the first and most instinctive response. Cities shut their gates. Roads were blocked. Guards were ordered to turn people away without exception. The logic was simple and terrifyingly persuasive. If sickness came from outside, then nothing from outside could be allowed in. What this logic failed to consider was what happened to those already caught on the wrong side of the decision. In 1665, in the small English village of Eyam, fear arrived quietly. It did not march in with soldiers or banners. It came folded inside a shipment of cloth from London. Within days, people began to fall ill. By the time the nature of the disease became clear, the village faced a reality that many other towns had avoided confronting directly. They could flee, as so many others had done, spreading the plague further into Derbyshire and beyond, or they could stay, sealing themselves off completely, knowing exactly what that choice would mean. Eyam chose isolation. There were no soldiers forcing compliance, no external authority threatening punishment. The decision was made internally by villagers who understood that leaving would almost certainly doom others. Boundary stones were placed around the village. Food was delivered to specific points. Money was left in vinegar-filled holes to reduce the risk of contamination. For over a year, no one crossed those borders. Families watched neighbors die. Parents buried children. Entire bloodlines vanished. By the end, nearly a third of the village was dead. Eyam did not save itself. It sacrificed itself, and history remembers it not because isolation worked, but because of the human cost it demanded. Elsewhere in Europe, isolation was not always voluntary, nor was it compassionate. In northern Italy, particularly in cities like Milan and Venice, plague response became systematic and ruthless. Houses with suspected cases were sealed shut, often with little investigation. Doors were nailed closed, windows were barricaded. Sometimes only the sick were inside. Sometimes entire families were trapped together, healthy and infected alike. Survival depended not on treatment, but on luck. Records describe neighborhoods growing silent overnight, not because the disease had passed, but because those inside were no longer allowed to exist publicly. Venice developed one of the earliest organized quarantine systems in history. People arriving from affected areas were sent to isolated islands known as lazarettos. There, they waited, not for care, for time. If they lived long enough without symptoms, they were released. If they died, their deaths were considered a necessary precaution. The system reduced transmission. It also normalized a terrifying idea that removing people from society was an acceptable solution, even when the cost was human dignity. What history rarely records in detail is the psychological damage isolation caused. Fear of the disease was soon replaced by fear of neighbors. A cough became a threat. A fever became a sentence. People hid symptoms to avoid being sealed inside their homes. Others fled before quarantines could be enforced, unknowingly carrying disease with them. Markets continued in secret. Religious gatherings moved behind closed doors. Isolation fractured trust, and broken trust accelerated spread. The very measure designed to stop the plague often ensured it traveled faster and farther. Isolation depended on timing, honesty, and cooperation. Three things fear destroys first. Cities that delayed acted too late. Cities that acted early drove people to flee. Those trapped inside isolation zones faced starvation, neglect, and abandonment. Those left outside faced exposure, desperation, and death. There was no version of isolation that did not harm someone. History does not record these decisions as evil. It records them as human responses to uncertainty. Centuries passed, science advanced, germ theory emerged, medicine improved, and yet when invisible threats returned, the instinct remained the same. Close borders, separate populations, reduced contact. Some measures worked, others created new crises. The technology changed. The fear did not. The certainty did not. The belief that isolation alone could solve what humanity did not yet understand persisted. The people who closed the gates were not monsters. They were parents, leaders, neighbors, and ordinary citizens making decisions with incomplete knowledge and overwhelming fear. Isolation was never just a medical response. It was a moral one. A decision about who belonged inside safety and who would be left outside it. History shows us that the most dangerous force during times of crisis is not ignorance, but certainty born from fear. This was not the last time isolation was used to fight an invisible enemy. And it will not be the last, because history does not repeat itself through events, it repeats itself through people.